Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History for an episode of What We're Into, our little monthly online magazine that talks about everything that's inspiring us and delighting us and making us talk and think in any given month. With me, fashion historian and international woman of no mystery, Amandahallay, and this episode, of course, is February 2020. Now, the first thing I should probably do is to wish you all a very happy new year. A little bit late, I know. There wasn't an episode of What We're Into in January, and I'm going to explain why through the first thing that I'm really into. I am really into the 9 incredible years that I spent with this guy by my side, Django. Those of you who regularly watch the Ultimate Fashion History will know all about Django. He was my little rescue cat and the Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group mascot, along with Kindle's cat Gravy, and also the subject to some of my more ridiculous Photoshop efforts. When I first rescued him, he was from a shelter, and his life before that had been pretty abusive, and so he was a terrified little guy. He spent the first 6 months with me hiding in a drawer, but as you can see here, he eventually became a total family cat and love bug, as well as something of a muse. For the past 9 years, there was no work or research or writing or Ultimate Fashion History episodes that I did without Django by my side. In fact, if you go back and listen to some of the very early episodes, you know, the Byzantine Empire and fashion in ancient Rome, you can actually hear Django's bling, his collar and his ident banging against his metal food bowl in the background. Anyway, although January started really well, and I'll tell you all about that in a second, Django, who was quite old and had very serious kidney problems, started to really falter in the last week of January, which is usually when I drop the What We're Into's. And a few days ago, we had to say goodbye to our beautiful boy. So let's dedicate this episode of What We're Into to this incredible cat. And thank you, all of you who learned about his passing on Facebook and sent me messages and left comments. It really meant a lot to me. All right. Anyway, the last 2 weeks of Django's life were just too upsetting and too stressful for me to do UFH, especially What We're Into, which I always hope is fun and joyous. So let me share with you now some of the fun and joyous things that have been going on in the world of UFH. In January, something kind of cool happened. The incredible Billy Porter, during the Golden Globe week, joined the Ultimate Fashion History group on Facebook and took questions from group members. How cool is that? And then, just a couple of days ago, the same happened with Alexa Chung and Tan France from the Netflix show What's Next in Fashion. And you can see here, if you look at this screenshot, Michael H. from the Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group wants to know. So this is really cool, I reckon. What else are we into? Let's look at some fashion. Last month we saw the haute couture collections, and my favorite, without a doubt, was by Dior, who drew inspiration from ancient Greece with these elegant, sinuous gowns. My favorite is the white gown on the left that draws such inspirations from chitons and peplos and himatians and all of that classical Grecian draping. I adored this. So elegant, so classy, and yep, there is an Ultimate Fashion History episode on actual ancient Grecian clothing. Sticking with the haute couture collections, I loved the Schiaparelli accessories. Look at these earrings and these sunglasses and this glove with the bone detail. So in keeping with Elsa's own surrealist interests, and of course the glove speaks very nicely to her iconic skeleton dress. I love these, aren't they fun? What else are we into? Well, at the beginning of January, I took my first trip to Chile. In fact, it was my first trip to South America, my first trip south of the equator, and oh my goodness, let me tell you about it. I was there on a work trip and primarily staying in Santiago, which is fabulous and, as you can see here, flanked by the mighty Andes. This was my first view of the Andes, and I've always been fascinated by the Andes, at least for the past 20 years, ever since I read this. Alive, the story of the Andes survivors by Piers Paul Reed. This is actually my favorite non-fiction book, and I have a bit of a tradition of giving it to friends and loved ones who are going through a hard time, because on the one hand, people might think this story in this book is a tale of nothing but horror and suffering and cannibalism, but in fact, it's actually a story of friendship and camaraderie and bravery, and especially the power of positive thinking. Before there was any talk of visualization or the law of attractions, there was Nando Parrado. Nando Parrado, legend. I highly recommend this book. It isn't creepy, it isn't sensationalist, it's so compelling and also really inspiring. Santiago was gorgeous. Here are just some images. It was elegant, it was chic. It reminded me an awful lot of Barcelona, as it would. Lots of palm trees, lots of 19th century buildings, but a really sort of trendy and chic, vibey edge as well. And it was a city of lots of juxtapositions. Adorable little artisan markets and also incredibly cool, chic upscale stores. And you can see the Andes in the background there. I did some of the best eating I have ever done in my life in Santiago. I took these pictures of just a couple of the dinners I had there, the best seafood I have ever eaten, and at such reasonable prices. But I was there to work, and work I did, spending most of my time in the archives of the museum, which were incredible. To see clothing cared for and preserved in this way was such a privilege. And here is how it works. As you can see, some clothing is on hangers, special hangers, and other clothing, other garments that have to lie flat, are in drawers. There is also a massive conservation area here for conserving and repairing historic clothing. It was really one of the most incredible experiences of my life. You can imagine how excited I was when I pulled a drawer open and found this, a mid-1960s Pucci. Fashion is not an island, it's a response. The museum doesn't just have couture and famous designers. It is curated with such an incredible attention to what real people wore as well. Clothing that may have appeared very ephemerally in connection with something happening in the broader socio-economic landscape, like this Nixon dress. But I didn't just see 20th century clothing, even though that's why I was primarily there. I also saw a lot of 18th century clothing, including men's court suits. And I tell you something, we all know that people were smaller in the 18th century, but when you pull open a drawer and see some of these men's jackets lying flat as opposed to on a mannequin, you really get an idea of just how tiny these people were. And you know how much I love my magazines. I spent an entire day looking through 60s magazines in the museum's enormous and beautifully curated paper archive. And that's me with my gloves on, looking through a 1960s Marie Claire. What an incredible experience I had. I also spent some time at VERONICA, which is a seaside resort. I didn't swim in the sea because it's too cold. It's so far south that the water in the sea is actually the polar stream, so a little bit nippy, but I did get to see sea lions, the first time I'd ever seen sea lions outside of a zoo. I recommend Chile to all of you. What a wonderful place, what a great experience, and I can't wait to go back. What else are we into? Oh, well, I am always into Veronica Lake, and this month I'm particularly excited because Dean Street Press, you all know that's my husband's publishing company, has just republished after 40 years out of print, Veronica, her autobiography. I actually did the copy edit on it before it went to print, looking through to see if there were any typos in the edition we were working from, and I couldn't put it down. It is so great. She is so smart and so delightful, and we all love that golden age of Hollywood, don't we? Our new version comes with a wonderful introduction by Eddie Muller, the presenter on TCM, who also hosts Noir Alley on the channel. I'll put the link to Veronica, the autobiography of Veronica Lake, in the description part of this episode, and you can buy it in either paperback or Kindle on Amazon. Okay, enough shilling. Although that's not really shilling. I'm really excited about this, and I would be talking about this even if Rupert's company hadn't published it. But come on, what else are we into? Well, I was beside myself with excitement that in January, Vogue Italia used no photographs. The entire issue was illustrated. There were 14 different covers. Here are 2 of them. And you can see here it says no photo shoot production was required in the making of this issue. The editor-in-chief wanted to make the statement that photo shoots use an awful lot of valuable resources. And regardless of the eco-friendly intent, I absolutely love that this might herald a return to fashion illustration. You know how much I love that. And most of you know that my dad, David Wolfe, started his career as quite a well-known fashion illustrator, so I love it. Here's another cover. Isn't this so much more exciting than seeing a beautiful, typical model or very recognizable celebrity on the cover of a magazine, on a cover of Vogue? This is real art, and here is one of the inner layouts from Vogue Italia, January 2020. I love this, and I really hope it sparks a bit of a trend. I'd love to see more of this, wouldn't you? What else are we into? Sticking with art, I am really into the paintings of Noel Coward. There he is, easel and brush in hand. Now, I did know that Noel Coward painted, but I don't think I'd ever actually seen any of his work he primarily did from his home in Jamaica. This came up on my Facebook feed. I think Anita, possibly, one of the Ultimate Fashion History friends, may have posted it on her thread. Anita, am I right? But anyway, both myself and Rupert became in love with these colourful, joyful views of Jamaica and Jamaican life by Noel Coward. This is my favourite. I love it so much I've made it my screensaver for the month. And sticking with art, I only just discovered the work of this Mexican artist called Dr. Lacra. And what does Dr. Lacra do? Well, he takes traditional paintings or vintage commercial art and puts tattoos on them. Sometimes they're old school tattoos, sometimes they're tribal tattoos, Maori tattoos. He even tattooed a Cupid doll. I think these are so much fun. I think they're gorgeous. And for the first time in the new year, I get to do this. What was the name of Hervé Villechaise's character on Fantasy Island? We all know what it was. Legitimate tie-in there. What else are we into? As I think I probably mentioned in the December episode of What We're Into, over Christmas we all flew down to Palm Springs, and one of the high points for me was definitely having a romantic dinner with Rupert at our favorite restaurant in the Coachella Valley. Melvin's at the Ingleside Inn. This is old school. We are talking a restaurant that Frank Sinatra actually frequented, and he even famously threw a plate of spaghetti at the wall. It is fantastic. There is live music with dancing, so you can do the cha-cha and the rumba in between courses. It has this wonderful long bar, and there am I at Melvin's having a wonderful big martini. What did I eat there? The most delicious individual beef Wellington, and I'm going to be talking more about beef Wellington in a second. And I have got to tell you about this store that I discovered for the first time in Palm Springs on that trip. Dazzles. It's a little store on the main drag, and as you walk in through its courtyard, it has this wonderful pink flamingo yard. And it is a treasure trove of mid-century artifacts, jewelry, and brooches. It is so much fun. Check out Dazzles next time you're in Palm Springs. What else are we into? We have been absolutely binge-watching all of the Harlan Coben adaptations on Netflix. We started with The Stranger, the twists. Then we went on and watched The Five, again, Harlan Coben, and then we watched the most recent, Safe. All of them were great, and what's interesting, of course, is that Harlan Coben is an American author, but all of these shows are set and made in England, and he's one of the executive producers. Anyway, if you like a good, twisty thriller, and you know that I do, check these out if you haven't already. What am I listening to? Well, these guys. These guys are called the Leopards, and they were a band from Kansas City in the 1970s, and they had one album, and I have been listening to it on a loop. It's called Kansas City Slickers. You can't buy it or stream it on Spotify, but the album is on YouTube. Please listen to it. It is the sweetest, strangest thing I've ever heard. It really sounds like late 60s Kinks, but in 1970s Kansas City. It's too difficult to describe this album. It's kind of ragtimey, very cheery, but also slightly melancholy. And all of these things taken together make it also a little bit eerie. Anyway, listen to the Leopards' Kansas City Slickers. You won't regret it. What else are we into? Oh, I know you have all met her already, but I am so into British performance artist, drag artist, and potter Juno Birch, who creates these incredible looks, sort of like an alien from the 50s or 60s who might be living on a northern British council estate. Juno also does wonderful ceramics of herself. She has this wonderful northern accent and a very sort of dry and down-to-earth sense of humour, and her whole look, her aesthetic and her personality reminds me a lot of Bette Lynch. Now, those of you who are English or familiar with Coronation Street, Britain's longest-running soap opera, you will know Bette Lynch. The food of the month, of course, is the individual beef Wellington, and not just because I had a delicious one at Melvin's, but a couple of weeks ago we had a dinner party with our friends Victoria and Chris, and I made individual beef Wellingtons. It was dead easy. Instead of making that mushroom duxelle, as it's called, that goes around the meat, I used a mushroom pate, wrapped the whole thing in ready-made pastry, threw it in the oven. It was delish and very impressive. This isn't mine. Mine looked slightly less impressive, but still really good. The cocktail of the month, of course, it is the Pisco Sour, the national cocktail of Chile, even though it's also the national cocktail of Peru. There's a bit of a kerfuffle, apparently, between the two nations as to who it belongs to. It doesn't matter. It's gorgeous. All you need is simple syrups, limes, bitters, and a bottle of Pisco, which you can get in any liquor store. And I brought several bottles back because it was cheaper there than here, and one of the bottles was shaped like a statue in Easter Island, because of course Easter Island, Rapa Nui, is owned by Chile, and the designer of the month, Helen Rose, the lovely, elegant Helen Rose, was a Feb baby, and let's just remind ourselves of some of the reasons why we love Helen Rose. Well, I hope you enjoyed this first episode of What We're Into for 2020. I hope I did okay. I'm still a bit upset and shaken up by Django, but I hope you enjoyed it anyway. I'm going to leave links to everything in the description area, where to get the Veronica Lake book, how to contact me, how to join the Facebook group, how to listen to the Leopards. Until then, thanks for watching. I'll be back very soon with more on the UFH, and until then, lots of love and Happy New Year. to you all.